One of the most popular videos on this channel was when I decided to cover how Tahm Kench support plays. Well, imagine my surprise and heartbreak when on the day I released that video that Riot announced a Tahm Kench rework. Since the rework has had time to settle now, League's top personalities have been quick to say that Tahm Kench support is dead and it's all about top lane Tahm Kench now.
Anyways, TLDR, I think that Tahm is probably just going to end up being a jungler. I mean, maybe he'll be a top laner or something.
But today, I'm here to show you that Kench is still unbenched in the support role. The Korean player we're analyzing today is named either M-Chi or Gangster, but I like Gangster better, so that's what we're going to go with. Since the Kench changes, he has strictly been playing Tahm Kench in Korean solo queue with some crazy success. You all know by now how these Korean story sections go. I can't get a lot of info, so we're going to speedrun it. Gangster started playing ranked in Season 4, in which he already loved support, maining Blitzcrank and finishing Gold 5 in his first season. Season 5, he switched to jungle and made it all the way to Diamond. Season 6 and 7 is when he first mained Tahm Kench support, but stayed stuck in Diamond once again. Seasons 8 and 9, he started maining Pyke support, wanting more agency in the game, and at one point in those seasons hit both Grandmaster and Challenger doing so. Season 10, he took a complete break from League of Legends. And now with the new items in Season 11, and his original Froggy Love getting some updates, he's back and better than ever maining Tahm Kench and is currently Master Tier in the hardest region in the world, where he continues to climb higher and higher to this day. Tahm Kench's weaknesses have not changed much since before his rework, but there are some struggles he still has that we gotta talk about. For one, he's still kinda awkward to play, having a much different playstyle as compared to some other straightforward tank supports that have been dominating in Season 11. After Riot adjusted his Devour ability to his ultimate, your ability to save a teammate from crucial enemy skills has dwindled in comparison to other supports like Morgana. Tahm Kench's range is still relatively short, and if you use his new W to go in, you need to be sure it's going to hit or suffer a lot of counterattack damage in the process. And finally, and most importantly, he's still a demon catfish that represents the foibles of mankind and an individual's inner flaws. Does this mean I'm still afraid of being fat? But even with all of these potential problems, Gangster has found a way to make it work. Before we get started, we have to touch on the new Tahm Kench with a fasting Senna support. Gangster does get paired with individuals who want to do this, and in short, it still works very well. Maybe even more so than it did before the rework. We're not going to go super in-depth on the ins and outs of laning with the Senna support, but in general they work well together because Tahm has great scaling with more money, and they both cover each other's weaknesses in lane very well. Their abilities synergize well together, and at the end of the day, they can still function as a very strong lane. At level 1, what Gangster levels up is dependent on what happens before minions spawn. If either team is invading and he has backup, he'll level up his W or Abyssal Dive first. We'll talk more about the specifics of this ability in a second, but having a large knockup and stun at level 1 means an easy time catching enemies and potentially some early kills for him or his team. More typically, when an invade is not happening, he'll level Q or Tongue Lash at level 1. He's maxing this ability first since it's Tahm's main source of poke damage, can slow or stun an enemy, and now with the rework, heals him for a flat amount plus some of his missing health as well. In lane, you want to use your Q to poke your enemies whenever possible, and the theme you'll notice early game for Tahm is bush control. Tahm's abilities are a bit telegraphed, so finding refuge in lane brush can help ensure you're landing not only your Tongue Lash, but also your W as well. The mana cost is relatively low for this ability, so he really just uses it whenever he can in the early game. At level 2, he'll typically level up his W or Abyssal Dive ability. Formerly his ultimate, Abyssal Dive has changed Tahm's support from being focused on negating enemy abilities to instead being an engaged support who likes to get the buffet started himself. Like his Tongue Lash, this ability is heavily telegraphed and has a long channel time, and because of that, you preferably want to use vision and bush control in lane to catch an enemy off guard. But that doesn't mean that you can't use it as a counter engage also if your ADC steps out of line or gets hooked. Abyssal Dive also has its cooldown reduced by 40% if you hit any enemy champion with it, which at level 1 takes this ability from a 21-second cooldown down to a 13-second cooldown instead. Gangster uses this to catch enemies off guard who aren't expecting the cooldown to be so low so early. The basic early game Tahm Kench combo is Abyssal Dive in to knock up an enemy, auto attack 3 times, and then stun them with your tongue lash. The 2.5 total seconds of CC early game normally means an easy chase down or kill. If Gangster knows that he won't be able to get 3 auto attacks off, he will instead tongue lash as soon as an enemy is out of range of those auto attacks to apply the slow and get off as much damage as possible. With a few more points in queue, you can also lead with a tongue lash to slow the enemy and apply 1 stack of your passive, then abyssal dive in, then land 2 auto attacks, and then finish off with your tongue lash again for the stun. At max level, your Q is on a 5-second cooldown before ability haste, so this version of the combo is a bit more doable once you have some levels in the skill. The last ability he maxes and the ability he takes third is Thick Skin. It's pretty much largely unchanged from its previous format. Thick Skin should feel very familiar for you amphibious aristocrats. Thick Skin still gives you the ability to activate it and gain a temporary shield based on recent damage you've taken, so it can allow you to take some more risky plays. The downside with the slight change it's seen is that the rejuvenation portion of it, how it heals you after you don't decide to activate the ability, is now delayed for 4 seconds after you've last taken damage. So if you're wanting to use it for sustain, this forces you to play a little safer in lane for a period of time to allow it to activate. But mostly, this should feel pretty much the same to you. Finally, at level 6, Gangster levels up his ultimate, or Devour. Tahm Kench's signature ability allows him to safely place an ally in his mouth, or an enemy if they have 3 passive stacks on them. Just like the pre-reworked version of Tahm Kench support, Gangster most typically saves this ability to save his allies. Signifiers to use this on your allies are if someone's near death, or if an enemy uses a large cooldown ability that puts them in danger, like Zed Ultimate or Annie Ultimate perhaps. Devour now even applies a handy shield on your allies after you spit them out, improving their chance of survival, and on top of that, you can now use your W with them in your belly as well. If someone really needs to get out, swoop them up with Devour, and then gap close away with Abyssal Dive. Less commonly, Gangster may use Devour on an enemy who his team is trying to burst. Again, you need 3 passive stacks on an opponent to have this ability eat them, so it happens a lot less often as Tahm support unless you start an engage and your team is taking their time trying to catch up to you. If that's the case, he may choose to pop the opponent into his mouth and shoot them back towards his team to allow them to finish the job. In a fight that looks like a clear win, Gangster uses his ultimate on enemies more often. In a fight that looks more even or even losable, he'll probably save his ultimate for an outplay for his teammates. Pre-rework in the mid-game, Tahm Kench would typically prefer to stick next to his ADC as opposed to other tanky supports who like to roam the map. But the rework has completely changed that. Now that you have a low CD gap close and a knockup, Gangster likes to roam through the mid-game and even early game under the right circumstances. Tahm Kench post-level 6 works very well when a teammate is nearby, but he no longer has to stick to his ADC all game to get the most out of his kit. While teamfighting as Tahm Kench, Gangster has 3 main objectives. Number 1 is to cause chaos with his CC. This can mean offensively engaging for your team, or following up on an engage with your W, somewhat like a mini Malphite ult, or peeling divers away from your important carries on the team. Using multiple abyssal dives in a teamfight is possible, just like in lane, if you keep landing the ability to reduce its cooldown, and Tongue Lash is on such a short cooldown that you should be getting off multiple within a teamfight regardless if you hit someone or not. Number 2 is to look for the most valuable Devour target. We talked about earlier how to use your ultimate, so whether this be on an ally to completely negate a big cooldown, or on an important enemy who your team can burst down, is completely up to the pace of the teamfight. Again, generally, if you look like you're going to win a teamfight, Gangster will use his ultimate on an enemy for more damage. If the teamfight looks more even or even losable, he'll use his ultimate on a teammate. And finally, in teamfights, you also want to sop up as much damage as possible while serving as the distraction. People love attacking Tahm Kench, and the mindset for most players is supports are easy to kill, so use your thick skin and tankiness to your advantage as teams try to burst you down. Some Tahm Kench tips you should know if you're going to try out the champion as support is that number 1, don't be afraid to use your Abyssal Dive or W ability as an escape. The range is surprisingly long, allowing you to easily get out of range of most opponents over walls. While it's not ideal to not get the reduced cooldown by not hitting anyone, saving your own skin and not taking a death can be worth it on its own. Also note, you can now use your Tongue Lash in combination with Devour on enemy champions with Tahm when they have full passive stacks. So if you're in dire need of reeling someone back into your team who just flashed away, you should be aware of this possibility. And even though it's on a much longer cooldown, you can still devour teammates and spit teammates out over walls, so keep an eye out for allies who look trapped and swoop them back to safety. For his build, he starts every game with a Relic Shield. He'll then rush his tier 2 boots, literally always getting Boots of Swiftness. He then starts to rush his mythic item, almost always getting a Locket of Iron Solari. From there, he loves to build Knight's Vow against most teams as a core item. His 5th item slot changes a lot and he rarely gets here, but he likes Anathema's Chains, Randuin's Omen, and even Redemption as options depending on the enemy team. If the game goes long or he needs some more oomph in his build, he'll build an Elixir of Iron. And for his 6th item, and throughout the whole game, as a good support does, he's buying Control Wards to win the Vision game, and potentially building a Wardstone if the game goes very late. If he's with a fasting Senna ADC, he'll swap out his starting item for a Doran Shield instead. His mythic with Senna will either be a Frostborn Gauntlet against more slippery teams, or a Sunfire Cape against teams with a lot of movement abilities. And if the game goes long enough for him to build a 6th item when with his Senna, he may work in a Warmog's Armor or Thornmail along the way. Gangster's runes stay the same regardless of whether he's with a fasting Senna or not. He takes Guardian, although Aftershock could potentially work as well, Font of Life for more sustain, Bone Plating because it's just the best rune, and Unflinching to allow him to more easily move around in fights. He also brings Approach Velocity for more movement speed when he lands a Tongue Lash, and most commonly brings Perfect Timing for big plays and dives. For his flex runes, he brings Attack Speed to help apply his passive, and either 2 armor, 2 magic resist, or 1 of each depending on the enemy team. Tahm Kench support works well with ADCs who want to go in like Samira or Tristana, or aggressive early game ADCs like Draven and Caitlyn. Tahm Kench support struggles against enchanter supports like Yuumi and Lulu, or ADCs with mobility like Ezreal and Kalista. There it is, everyone, the reworked Tahm Kench support video many of you have been waiting for. I appreciate all the comments requesting the update. I wanted to let it settle a little bit so we could see what people were doing with it, or if people were even using it as a support, and as we can just see from the previous video, it still works pretty well. If you guys want to see me try the new Tahm Kench live, I still really even haven't played him since the rework, you can catch me live on twitch.tv/Bakak every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Or if you can't catch me then, I would just love for you to leave a comment below, like the video, subscribe, all that good stuff that everyone always tells you to do. Really does help, so I appreciate all of you who I see consistently in the comments, and I hope to see some of you there that I haven't before as well. That's it for today, y'all. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, I hope you have a great day or night or whatever it is for you. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.